Okay, yeah, 30-second intro from each would be great to get started. Thanks, Stan.
Okay, so my name is Travis Duncan. I'm a candidate for mayor, obviously, and our website is wearethemayor.com. When we say that, we really mean it. If you don't feel like you are the mayor, it's because of how City Hall has been doing things. We have to remember this is the people's government. This is for the people. We need to decentralize the hierarchy. The mayor should be the #1 servant. And that's what I intend to do. I have the energy, I have the love for people, I have the patience, I don't get offended by anything. I'm willing to take responsibility and account. What does that mean, 5 seconds? 5 seconds. Well, thank you. And I'm looking forward to getting into this with everybody. This is a very important topic.
Laura.
Thank you all for being here. I'm Laura Morrison. I actually have a technical background. I have a master's in math and a public health graduate certificate in community preparedness and disaster management, which is getting a lot of focus these days. I was on the city council from 2008 through 2014, and I came from, before that I was president of the Austin Neighborhoods Council, which obviously represents neighborhoods and stands up for stability and integrity of neighborhoods, but also was very forceful in forming coalitions with environmentalists and working together, and I'm looking forward to talking more.
All right, and Alex.
My name is Alex Stranger, and I drive a pedicab for a living, meaning that there is no greater environmental steward than me sitting at this table. Sorry, the thing that differentiates me from the rest of the candidates is that I actually use my body to make a living. And with that being said, I firsthand see the importance of breathing clean air, drinking clean water, and eating real food in order to be able to function properly and positively in society. And that is why we need to address these environmental concerns so that we can live on this planet, so to speak. I got a little distracted by the time, but that's the gist of what I'm saying.
Do you think that the City of Austin should account for the social and environmental costs of its operations, purchases, contracts, investments, policies, and programs, perhaps by internally applying a social cost of carbon? Please answer yes or no and explain your position.
I mean, so I think that we already are paying.
Sorry, we're starting at this end.
Oh, I thought we were.
Okay, so yes, we should be accountable for our actions. This is actually a big reason why I am running for mayor, is I don't think we have been accountable enough. I don't think we're prepared for the kind of volatility that we're going to see. And yes, this is primarily a social justice issue. You know, Earth has been commodified. Earth has been turned into something that we have to pay for. And Mother Earth is not sending us a bill to live here. That is a human construct. And it came about at the industrial age. We have to look at the history. We have to look at this as an equity issue. And the ultimate goal during this transition to renewables is that we decommodify electricity. We live on a planet of abundant electricity. Martin Luther King talked about this in the 60s. Why are we paying for water on a planet where that is the most abundant resource? Why are we paying for electricity? We have the technology to decommodify these things, and then also we didn't get to touch on the carbon tax, so to speak, but yes, we're going to sue everybody, basically saying that this is a violation of our sovereignty to live on the planet. Yeah, we're out of time, so.
How much time do we have for this?
1 minute.
Oh, okay, that sounded like more than 1 minute. Yes, absolutely, and I think that it's important to realize that you need to know how to make that happen. I know when I was on the council and we were getting so much pushback from Austin Energy about doing local solar, we were able to put an advisory committee together that put together the real value of solar, including all those impacts and everything. And so one of the things that I proposed as moving forward as mayor that I would do would be to expand our environmental review to account for climate impacts, to account for and actually measure impacts on our social structure of different policy decisions. So at first, you have to know what the impacts are, so that's the first step. And then you're able to put forward some real hard numbers to allow you to actually account for them, which, as you suggested, there's one way, and who knows, maybe there are others, but depending what the impacts are. But yeah, I think that we need to step up our game, and that's one way we can do that.
Yeah, I think that we definitely, are paying a huge social cost in terms of how we do this. We need to reduce our carbon footprints, and we need to utilize solar energy in a much greater capacity than what we're doing. I think one thing that hasn't been mentioned, though, is the fact that we need to be holding our developers accountable here in Austin for how they build in terms of the environmental hazards that some of these people pose, such as in Code Next, one of the drafts stated that you can build on up to 90% impervious cover, and I'm no environmental expert, but it doesn't take an environmental expert to realize that that is a bad idea.
Okay, thank you. We're going to go back now. Mayor Steve Adler's here, so we're going to go back to a 30-second intro from him, and then I'll repose the question so you can catch up with us on this first question that we just did. So 30 seconds is yours for just a quick hello.
Great, and I apologize for being tardy. We all have way too many events now to make them all. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Obviously, we'll be talking a lot about environmental issues over the course of the evening. I just say I've been really proud to be part of a 10-1 council that has led on issues like taking the minimum wage up to, living wage up to $15 $15 an hour, taking the sick leave and making a fair chance hiring in our city, leading on immigration issues, leading on LGBTQ issues. I've just been really proud to be part of a city that now is taking statewide and national leadership on those kinds of issues. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So we'll go ahead and jump right into the question. This is a 60-second question, or response, I should say. Do you think that the City of Austin should account for the social and environmental costs of its operations, purchases, contracts, investments, policies, and programs, perhaps by internally applying a social cost to carbon? Please answer yes or no, and then explain your position.
I've never actually thought about applying it internally within the city, but I think it's a really good idea. And I think it's a good idea because I think that it's something that we could lead by example on and really begin to establish that kind of mindset. We're never going to be able to get to the places we need to get to nationally without a carbon tax or a carbon credit. So being able to take a look at how that might actually be applied within the city, I haven't thought about before. I don't know exactly how that would work, but I really love the concept of it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next question. For this next question, so what we're doing is starting out by just rotating down. So first was Travis, he started, and then we'll have Steve, we'll have you do next. From now on, we'll be relating to you as your first name, since you are all candidates together. Steve, you'll go next, and then we'll rotate like that. So this goes to you first, and then Laura to follow, etc. 60 seconds for this question. What do you think are the strongest and weakest aspects of the 2015 Austin Community Climate Plan?
So we're starting with you now.
Yes, that's for you.
We're getting oriented now. Okay. The strongest and weakest part of the plan. I think that the strongest aspect of the plan is that it continues to set over time increasingly greater goals for the city. There's resistance whenever we started setting goals, but we find that we're able to meet goals that people didn't think that we could. The technologies are bending our way. So I like the fact that with each progressive goal, we're getting more and more tough. What I don't like about it is that it lacks the really direct decision points that have to be taken into account in order to be able to get to where we need to go. because at this point, on the current pace that we are, we're not going to make we have a decent shot at the 2030 goals, but not at the 2050 goals that we have in the city. And I think that we need to be spending more time and more effort on the really specific pathways that will enable us to be able to get to the goals and to continue to make them more stringent.
Thank you. Laura?
I would agree that I think the goals are the strongest part of it, but it's, I would say that's the easy part, is setting the goals. And in terms of the weakest part, I think specifically one of the things we need to do a better job at is helping every able-bodied person or every person in this community understand their own personal impact on climate change and their own personal need to have a commitment to making changes in their lives. And that's a big educational effort. You know, I think that you know, raising the awareness of our youth that their future is on the line might help get even better responses and stronger actions from individuals. But you know, all up and down the age spectrum, I think that the city has a responsibility to try to amp that up to make a big difference.
So I'm going to have to agree with Laura and Steve about the fact that the community climate change program is definitely very good in terms of the fact that we need a list of goals to achieve to become a more environmentally friendly and sustainable city. You know, I think that the huge weakness is the fact that a lot of issues that are coming into play today were not really taken into account when the plan was written, such as the infestation of Uber drivers clogging up our roads, putting tons of carbon footprints into the atmosphere. It's obviously an environmental safety hazard, as well as the Lime scooters and the electric cabs, as well as the pedicabs, which are, you know, a lot of them are now motorized, and nothing has really been taken into account or even discussed on how we can use alternative modes of transportation effectively to help us become better environmental stewards, as well as improve mobility here.
So I was a bit surprised to hear Laura say that we need to raise awareness in the youth, because from my perspective, we need to raise awareness in the older generation. The youth is aware. That's why I'm running. And we feel like we have been not listened to. We feel like we're screaming in an echo chamber. And what I would say the weakness of the plan is there has been no plan. There is no plan. There's only studying and positioning, and what I don't see and I haven't seen is a willingness to make the investments that need to be made. I've been very critical on this issue, and please don't take it personally. It's not a personal matter. This is a matter of humanity and who are we going to be on this planet. So we have technology in our network that can bring us to 100% renewable energy for our electricity by 2022 or before then. So there is the technology, and we knew about this 20 years ago, and nothing has been done. And I'm sitting here asking why.
Okay, thank you. This is going to be another 60-second question round, and we're going to start with Laura this time. Given that portions of our climate plan rely on compliance and participation from individuals and businesses, what are the best strategies you see for engaging the public in the behaviors necessary to meet those components? And how are you leading by example?
Leading by example. Well, the best strategies, I mean, we need to be able to find ways to be where people are and show actual actions and of course show by example. So we can't expect people to be able to just come to meetings and learn how to be climate friendly. And so it's a matter of working with other institutions, it's a matter of working with schools, it's a matter of working with other organizations all up and down the spectrum. It's a matter of ensuring that we have culturally relatable programs and understand that there are different kinds of life challenges that people are dealing with and need different kinds of solutions. You know, it's a little tough to suggest to somebody that they should ride their bike instead of driving. If they have 3 kids, they have to get to school and stop and buy groceries at the end of the day. So how am I leading by example in my own personal life? I guess I would say by living a low impact, walkable lifestyle.
Okay, Alex? Do you want me to repose the question?
Yeah, could you please
Okay,
just
I'll ask it again.
answer it as best
Yeah.
as possible.
Given that portions of our climate plan rely on compliance and participation from individuals and businesses, what are the best strategies that you see for engaging the public in the behaviors necessary to meet those components, and how are you leading by example?
Okay, so I think that the best way to engage the public on this issue is to start by, you know, educating not only our children, but the parents as well. I used to be a substitute teacher at AISD, and I can say with absolute certainty, based on firsthand experience, that the knowledge that these kids are receiving on the environment is abominable. You know, people are throwing plastic bottles in trash cans, and they think that that's totally okay, and there's no real environmental education taking place amongst a lot of kids in AISD. And I think that there also should be workshops for parents so that they can learn how to be better environmental stewards from a common sense standpoint as well. I think that when it comes to businesses, you know, I think, you know, one huge thing that we need to do is we need to, you know, put our foot down, show a little more testosterone when it comes to addressing these companies, and, you know, make them, I guess, abide by the rules of the road, so to speak. Make them build in environmentally friendly ways, make them pay property taxes if they're going to open up for-profit companies, especially if you're going to build a stadium on a environmentally sensitive area. Like, literally the list goes on. I only have 10 seconds, so we'll talk about this more.
So, you know, we have to lead by example by saying and admitting, I'm a hypocrite. We're all hypocrites. The fact that we exchange Federal Reserve fiat notes every single day means we all have blood on our hands. We have to acknowledge that as Americans, everything is interconnected. Our foreign policy is very connected to what happens right here in Austin. So we need to take accountability. We need to be honest, truthful, factual with ourselves. And then we can start from a place of being humbled and saying, okay, wow, we're not that progressive. So in terms of compliance, we have to understand that if Austin is a climate leader, we're in really big trouble on this planet. Because what we need to do is we need to take radical measures like saying we're going to ban all single-use plastics. We're going to have the most radical investment in an incentive program to switch to zero-emission vehicles. We're going to accelerate public transportation. What that will do is we'll have a chain reaction effect, because if we force that Walmart makes its supply chain completely biodegradable plastics, they're going to make that change across their entire supply chain. So somebody has to stick their neck out on the line. Thank you.
No, I think I'm set. You know, we're lucky enough to be living in a community where climate change mitigation is something that is so popular in the community. We have a community that really does want to help and does want to be involved, and generally speaking, it's one of the more aware communities that we have. But we have to make the choices that people make as easy as we possibly can. We have to make them available. We have to raise awareness at every turn we can. We are in Climate Change Awareness Month right now. And I've been on all the TV stations and in the newspaper using the bully pulpit of this office, as I've tried to do over the last 4 years on this issue. I speak about it a lot. When I go into schools, into community meetings, this is something that I talk about all the time. So visibility and awareness, I think, is important. My own personal choices, I compost at home. Diane and I drive an all-electric and a hybrid car. We try to do what we're supposed to do, conserving electricity and water. It's a choice on how to spend your time. I spend a lot of my time with C40 cities and with the other 2 MOU cities. So when you look at personal choices with time, and I walk to work.
Okay, next question. You have 60 seconds for this question. Alex, we'll start with you for this next one. Right? Right, okay. Austin has an existing goal to achieve community-wide net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050 or sooner if possible. This implies that fossil fuel use in the city would need to be near zero. What actions do you support to help Austinites transition away from fossil fuels at home and on the road?
First off, unlike Stephen, I do not have the luxury of being able to walk to work. That being said, I think that when it comes to transitioning to renewable energy, we need to construct a rail line. That's a huge thing that we need to do. We need to have our rail line and our rail system be practical. We need a rail system that goes through Congress, through South First, up and down Lamar, Palmer Lane. We need something that goes through William Cannon, through Slaughter. We need train lines to go into Dripping Springs, Buda, Kyle, San Marcos, the surrounding areas of Austin, especially since I didn't address this earlier, but you have Dripping Springs and a lot of companies, they dump chemicals and all types of crap into Onion Creek on Dripping Springs, and we need to work with our neighboring cities to help them become better environmental stewards, and hopefully offer the building of a rail line to improve jobs and build the economies of our surrounding cities to help with our environmental concerns throughout Central Texas as well as Austin.
Thank you.
So there's a lot to cover here. Obviously, we do know we need urban rail. I would like a train that doesn't make a horrible hissing sound when it goes by, because environmental noise stress is a thing. We have magnetic train technology that can hum at 528 hertz or 432 hertz or whatever, and actually optimize our human biofield. We also, I'm willing to say, look, you get a 75% discount for 2 years on your utility bills if you switch to a zero emissions household. Let's incentivize it for real. Let's really make it just such a no-brainer, and then the auto industry is going to pick up, and they're almost ready for this. Otherwise, 2050. If we listen to the consensus among the community, that's way too late. I mean, if Austin is 2050, where does that put Houston? Where does that put Kansas City? Right? So we need to think globally, and we really need to take a lead on this. We have the technology. Whether or not you or anyone else is willing to believe it, that's on you.
Clearly, the next big hurdle for the city as a community is going to be transportation as we move away from power generation. And we're going to have to make up a huge stagger involved in that. And the best way to do that is electrification of cars, electrification of buses, both in public and private fleets. We've started moving in that direction, and we are putting a lot of money against charging stations around the city. We've committed to take 330 our vehicles of our fleet into electrification, working with Capital Metro. It's beginning to bring in electric buses, trying to lobby to get the VW money put aside for that use. It's also dealing with high-capacity transit that would be electric. And that's the kind of thing that was part of the announcement yesterday, moving forward with an 18-month community conversation starting now on high-capacity transit. It's land use, making our communities walkable. It's having more urban centers in the city than we have. It's doing things like the 2016 Mobility Bond, which put in record and unprecedented sums in urban trails, $50 million in sidewalks, and completing the bicycle network that we have in the city.
Thank you, Laura.
So I would certainly start by making sure that we achieve our own goal of Austin Energy being carbon-free by 2030, and there's a lot to be said about that. We can talk about that later. Obviously, all the other things that have been mentioned, but what I would like to do is really focus on the fact that high-capacity transit really needs to be on the ground and working and successful in this town. And I'm very concerned about the fact that, we had a failure in 2014, and a lot of the problem was we didn't have broad consensus about that plan. There has been 30 months of community involvement and data analysis that's gone on to come to broad consensus, and unfortunately, the plan that was enrolled yesterday was not in sync with that work that's been done. So I'm very concerned about being on, that it being a recipe for failure. And I think that that's an absolute critical thing to be able to bring that back around to make it a community-driven plan so it can be successful. Because, you know, vote after vote not successful is not going to get us where we need to be.
Okay, thank you, candidates. For the next round, we're going to start with Travis. And this next section is actually going to be climate resilience, the next section 2. So I'm going to start with the first question. Or actually, no, I'm sorry, I'm just going to do the overview of the section. So climate anomalies and climate disasters are becoming a new norm for Texas. In Central Texas, risk of drought, flooding, and fire are our biggest threats. Strategies for building resilient communities must account for the systematic inequities that create these vulnerabilities in the first place. So that's our header for the section.
So considering the disproportionately negative impacts of climate change on low-income communities and communities of color, what are your top concerns for Austin specifically, and how would you go about addressing them?
Yeah, you know, we have to look at the environmental toxins that are near the facilities, and we really have to explore some sort of a reparations model. I don't know what exactly that looks like. I think there's a cooperative approach to that. Also, we need to acknowledge that there's still Roundup and things getting poured all over the soil, and there's toxins leaching into the water. So we really have to ban the environmental toxins and stop the poisoning of ourselves. And then also, the key issue, again, I'll come back to this. This is about the commodification of Earth. It is nobody's right to bottle water and to capture water and then sell it back to you. Water should be free, and I'm committed to making it free for all people. That's the first thing. So, you know, and that goes for all natural resources. I think we're out of time, but I hope I've made the point clear.
We should have a red flag.
So resilience in the city and the impact of climate change falls disproportionately among people that are least able to be able to deal with those challenges. And we see that in our city, you know, with respect to the flooding that's occurred in our city. The PAF programs that we've initiated and continue to fund and are part of the November bond election. So I urge everybody to vote for the bond election in November. Being able to provide people the opportunity to be able to move into areas that are not so flood prone. We need to redo our land development code, because right now, as we have the affordability issues and people are having to move further and further away, they're more and more susceptible to the challenges of flooding in the city. So we have to be able to deal with that as well. And a lot of it is just making sure that people have access to the tools we have, access to solar, access to the kinds of protections that other people in the community are able to avail themselves of.
So I think that we absolutely need to think about this comprehensively, and every decision that we make, i.e., like if we do a review as I had proposed, an environmental review, but more specifically, I think that one really important thing to do is to make sure that we have a robust local solar program for low-income communities, so that they can actually partake in not only being part of the solution, but also enjoy the decrease in bills that would come along with that. Obviously, flooding, especially if you look at Atlas 14, that points out that there's some serious problems that we're going to be having, especially in some of the low-income communities, and making sure that we address those problems in an equitable way. And then third, I think that we need to think about it, as I mentioned, in everything that we do, and in particular, it's getting hotter. And for instance, our aquatic system needs to be robust, and it needs to be particularly robust in lower income communities, so that people have an opportunity to cool off, and that has many very positive societal impacts too, to have a community gathering place, but it's going to be more and more important as we move into the future.
I think that we need to start with the basics, and we need to actually utilize our electric vehicles in a way that makes sense for the concerns of everybody in Austin. You know, we have electric scooters, and our electric scooters need to be at our bus stops and in front of our apartment complex instead of scattered about downtown for drunk people to use and run through red lights and crash into things. So we should first off make better use of our dockless mobility. Another thing that we need to be doing is we need to incentivize people to use efficient lawn, like water efficient lawn. I think I'm 100% in favor of offering property tax discounts and exemptions for individuals who use water efficient lawn on their grass and whatnot. And I'm almost out of time, but I think that also we need to enforce, there's a big issue of people having their dogs go to the bathrooms and by our creeks and our rivers, and they don't clean up after their pets, and we need to do a much better job of ticketing these individuals for doing that.
Okay, thank you, everybody. This next one, prepare yourselves. It's going to be a quick one. We're giving 30 seconds for each question, for each answer on this one. What are your proposals to help protect the poor, the homeless, the young, the very young, and the elderly from the effects of extreme heat that our climate resiliency plan predicts and that are already occurring? We're going to start with you, Alex, or Travis, on this one. Oh, sorry.
It's okay. With respect to individuals, we have to make sure that the customer protection plan elements in Austin Energy remain robust and well funded. From a city perspective, we have to continue with the heat island mitigation that we have. We have to keep the aquatics program available throughout the city. And it's I think just the general support and monitoring.
When I was on the council, we put together the first extreme heat response plan because we were concerned about homeless folks that were on the street. And Cat Metro got into it, and there were air-conditioned buses, and when there were no other options, there was water that was placed. So it needs to be part of our response, our mitigation and response plan, for sure. But in addition, we have a big responsibility in terms of Austin Energy and putting policies in place, which I was part of, to ban shut-off of electricity and things like that. There's a lot of other things that I do.
All right. So in 30 seconds, in 30 seconds, the first thing that we really need to be focused on is we need to increase the number of transitional housing units for our homeless. If you're out on the street in 105-degree weather and you're sick and you're addicted to drugs and you feel hopeless, you're stuck there and you're at risk of a heat stroke by a large amount. So transitional housing to help people get clean and get better is a huge priority that we need to invest a lot more in. And secondly, a lot of our elderly individuals, they live in affordable housing units, and we need to make sure that the affordable housing units are properly kept up so that they're less likely to get a heat stroke and whatnot.
So I encourage everybody to look at our website, wearethemayor.com. We have a very ambitious plan for ending homelessness altogether, and it has to do with building sustainably using the right materials, because when we do that, we address the root cause of affordability, which is building with earth homes, sustainable materials that actually make the home net zero and eliminate the need for electricity bills and keep the house cooler and the biofield more optimized. The other aspect of that question was the heat. We have to look at the ice cores, and we have to look at the history of this planet, and actually it's quite likely that if we keep pumping carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, we could trigger a cooling effect. Look at the ice cores. We have to be prepared for any sort of scenario.
Thank you. Again, you'll have 30 seconds for this question, and we'll be starting with Laura. What policy changes do you support to address the increased risk of flooding in the Austin area that comes as a result of more intense rain events and increasing development?
Well, absolutely, we have to be stronger on not developing in our floodplain areas. And, there's been a lot of push to allow additional development on properties that are in floodplains. And now we're going to have to be looking actually at changing some of those entitlements now that they're in, now that they're going to be new floodplains that we're working
stricter impervious cover requirements. We also need to raise the density bonus fee in lieu to $4 a square foot compared to $2. It should probably be raised even more, but we need to do whatever we can to de-incentivize development in environmentally sensitive areas.
So I just came back from the Protecting Mother Earth conference in the Nisqually Reservation in Washington, and the way they described it is that when we dam the rivers, we clog the veins of our mother. And we have to recognize that this entire city is in a floodplain because we've dammed up the Highland Lakes. So that's actually the 100-year flood plan that we need to look at, is what are we going to do about that? Because the damming the rivers has horrible effects on the ecology of the entire situation. There's so much more to cover here. Impervious cover is obviously an issue. Next.
I've always been a very reliable vote on the council in the last 3 years to stop development within the floodplain area, the 100-year floodplain area. I just lost a vote on the 6-5 concerning development on Koenig Lane up here that was in the floodplain. But I've been a consistent vote because we just see that recurrent issue over and over again. We need the detention standards that were part of what was being discussed with the rewriting the land development code, where we had commercial properties that not only had to detain what they were doing, but they had to make up part of the stagger because we hadn't been doing it in the past. We need to do buyouts and physical mitigation of flooding.
Okay, this is going to be another quick one, another 30-second round. Do you think the most recent draft of the Water Forward Plan adequately addresses the future needs of the city? Why or why not?
Well, I think that any water plan is a good step in terms of addressing the needs of the city. I think that we need to work on, like I said, mitigating the impervious cover requirements. They need to be a lot stricter, and we also need to monitor runoff and what goes into our water supply as well. And I'm excited to continue to work with the water for with each and every one of y'all and the makers of the Water Forward Plan to help perfect this plan to keep Austin on the right path towards environmental stewardship.
Yeah, this is a yes and. I know that they're exploring all sorts of options. There's a lot of really smart experts working on this problem because water is obviously the fundamental issue. The reason why it's yes and is because I don't see anything about decommodifying water. Water is a fundamental human right. We all deserve free water, so that needs to be a part of the plan. We also need to look at the damming, the rivers, how we're going to deal with that. And then also we have a technology that can basically purify any toxified water in an oxygenated vital structure.
There are a lot of things to like about the Water Forward Plan. The imaginative reuse and expansion of that, the non-centralized supply, the green construction elements that are all there. I think that's really good. Conservation strategies are critical. What I'm missing when I read the Water Forward Plan is the change in business model for the water company. How is it that a water company continues to survive on an economic model in a world where we want it to be selling less water per capita? And that question wasn't answered, and it needs to be answered.
So I'm proud to have, when I was on council, been part of kicking off what became the Water Forward Plan. And frankly, that was in response in large part to having lost the fight against Water Treatment Plant number 4, which we did not need, which is unfortunate. But I will say that I'm very impressed with the fact that there was a plan put forward that was carefully analyzed, lots of different options looked at in terms of the portfolio that would all depend on local sources. There's some specifics I'm not sure about, but I'm looking forward to getting the review, the public review, and the commission's review.
Thank you. Next question, 30 seconds. As deeper droughts and hotter temperatures increase the danger of extreme wildfires, what steps might City Council take to address the vulnerabilities of Austin's residents and Austinites to wildfires?
Yeah, I mean, this is a central issue that we're going to deal with across the entire planet, really. The types of materials we build with, unfortunately, are so flammable, and, you know, sometimes the fire is just stronger. And I'm always going to be honest with you. We have to do everything we can. Like I said, part of that has to do with reducing emissions, getting to cleaner energy sources. But we have to start building with better materials so we're more resilient to that, because there are flame-resistant ways to build.
It's a real concern, especially in West Austin, where we have so much trees and the ground is covered with tinder that can. It's a crisis and a problem waiting to happen. Now we saw what happened in Bastrop. We have tested early response systems, early notification systems. We don't have one yet that really works. I don't think that technology exists. So I don't know the answer to that question. But because I don't know the answer to that question, it's risen to the top among the top issues for our auditors to take a look at. We put money aside for that because that is a crucial and timely issue.
We really need to think about this in two phases. One is we need to think about mitigation, and the other is how do we respond and how do we prepare to respond in case there is a fire. And I don't know if you all have read the hazard mitigation plan. It's about this thick, but it's very interesting and it gets updated every so often. The last time it was getting updated that I was involved, there were like 2 people that showed up at the public involvement meeting. So there's that, and making sure that our land development is appropriately done. But one of the concerns that we need to be on top of is to make sure that we have adequate evacuation plans, and I don't believe we do. We need to be planning with access when there are areas subject to that.
Hire more firefighters. The application window right now to be an AFD is every 2 years you have a chance to apply. You should be able to apply every year, and they should try to move a different setup. They should try to have a new class every 6 months and have it move in a continuous cycle to address these needs.
Okay, thank you, everybody. So we're moving on to another section now. Our next section is going to be energy greenhouse gas reduction. And here's the overview. So Austin Energy was an early leader on renewable energy and has a growing renewable energy portfolio, but it also continues to burn coal and natural gas to produce electricity. The utility has a history of innovation on solar policy, but most rooftops that could be used for solar in Austin have not been utilized, and solar remains out of the reach for most low-income residents and those in multifamily housing. Carbon-free electricity is essential for decarbonizing other sectors, especially transportation. We want to hear your ideas for building on past successes at Austin Energy. And here's the first question.
Great, and everyone can take a breath because you do have 60 seconds for this next question. And quite a lead-in. Despite declining costs of solar, many low-income residents and multifamily housing tenants are challenged to participate in Austin Energy's existing rooftop solar programs. Do you think it should be a priority for the utility to develop programs, adjust policies, and update the billing system to make it possible for all Austinites to participate affordably and benefit from distributed solar? Please answer yes or no, and then explain your position, and we'll start with Steve.
So I do believe that we should be making solar available to folks that can at least afford it. And the city's doing a kind of a groundbreaking program. We just got awarded the U.S. Conference of Mayors with a community solar project that we have on the east side of town that neighbors are allowed to participate in. They can guarantee rates over an extended period of time and save money. And their kids walking to school can walk by the plant and experience what it is. Beyond that, I am in favor of taking a look at the building specs that's required, regulations in the city, so that homes are built in a way that make them more ready for solar use. And if homes were just routinely built that way, were just built into the system that way, the cost of retrofitting it or adding that at a future date would be as great, and the barrier would be.
Yes, my answer is yes. And I think that there's a lot that we can do to really promote this. One of the models that I think would be worthwhile looking at is actually a jobs program where folks in the community are pulled into installation and programs that are pushed to install and make it available to folks in lower income areas. Another issue that I think we can look at is there are some things that are available that people might not be aware of. For instance, the PACE program that I think is finally in place that allows you to pay for your solar and have it be addressed through your property taxes is something that that people need to be aware of if they're even going to be able to take advantage of it. I understand that we have made some progress recently on multifamily and making that available, making solar available for multifamily and the billing getting worked out for that. So I think that it has to be all hands on deck. It needs to be a priority, and we can do a lot better.
So I would actually like if you could maybe repeat that question.
Yes, sure, thank you. Despite declining costs of solar, many low-income residents and multifamily housing tenants are challenged to participate in Austin Energy's existing rooftop solar programs. Do you think it should be a priority for the utility to develop programs, adjust policies, and update the billing system to make it possible for all Austinites to participate affordably and benefit from distributed solar? Please answer yes or no and then explain your position.
Yes, I 100% support that, and I think we also need to expand our educational opportunities so people can understand the benefits of utilizing solar energy. We, as a city, we're doing a good job. Steve mentioned this, and I think that one of the things that we need to do is we need to start buying and owning more equity in terms of solar companies so that we can distribute solar panels on multifamily houses at a more cost-effective rate.
Thank you.
So again, this is an issue where I've been very critical of the type of philosophy, the type of approach that we have employed in the past. I used to work in the solar industry. I worked for 3 different solar companies. I can tell you that the solar incentive program actually incentivizes companies to charge more for people, and it makes it harder to access. I've met with thousands of families across this city, and that was where I realized that the economic desperation is very high. In 2016, I came before the council with a plan for us to essentially shift the way we look at things in terms of more of a collective ownership model, so that the city, instead of doing rental agreements for solar farms, we look at all of our rooftops like one big solar farm. And when we purchase together, we can work directly with manufacturers, we can get under $1 a watt installed, and no one has to individualize the burden, meaning they don't have to take a personal loan to put it on their house for 20 years. We can buy it all together, and then we own that solar, us, meaning the people, and then we eliminate the cost of the energy generation.
Okay, for the next question, we'll have 60 seconds again. Do you think it is important to use open roof space on Austin homes and businesses for solar energy production? If no, why not? And if yes, what new and existing policies and programs do you support to achieve this? Laura?
Yes, I do. I think that we need to be pushing our local solar as much as possible. It's an important part of the overall portfolio and being able to reach the goals that we've set. And I think we should be increasing those goals and making them stronger. So in terms of policies to actually make that happen, you know, it might make sense to help people understand the options there, for one thing. When people go in with designs and into the city development review, to actually make that a one stop along the way of the review, and that is to say, what are the options for local solar on your rooftop, and then incentivize people to make that happen. It's probably just not even raised to a lot of people as something to consider.
All right, so I'm going to be really honest, and this is an issue that I need to learn a lot more about. And that is why, when elected, I am really excited to work very thoroughly and closely with members of Earth Day Austin and Solar Austin, and even strongly consider putting a couple of y'all on my planning commission so that we can figure this out together and, you know, utilize our solar energy in the best way possible.
So yeah, I think, again, we're seeing the difference between incrementalism versus what is required, which is dramatic, radical steps forward. You know, consumer choice is a very slow adopting model. And consumer choice meaning putting the burden on people to make those individual decisions. Again, one very simple incentive we could give to any commercial property, any residential property is, hey, if you let us put solar panels on your roof, you get a 50% discount on your bill for however long. You know, no incentive is, you know, strong enough. I think we need to just go really strong forward on this. And all the rooftop space is needed. And then you can look at the possibility of using microgrids. And the next step is also innovation in terms of storage technology. And we can actually take the waste from the Fayette coal plant and make graphene storage in that. So.
I agree that one of the things we need to be doing is to be using incentive programs. We have incentive programs now for large folks that are willing to co-invest with the city and making sure that their roofs are available for that. But also individual homes, those programs we need to make sure are being used and are available. We need to do the building code allowances we talked about earlier so that those opportunities to be able to use those roofs are things that we can maximize and are built that way to be able to encourage it. We have to do a better job for the awareness campaign because there are a lot of incentives and availability that exist in this community that most people just don't know about. And I think that if we did a better job of that, we would have greater utilization of that. And then we have to really push the equitable access because so many of these things are just available for people that have the ability to have the capital to initiate it. And we need to make sure that all these things are happening on those roofs that it isn't going to happen unless as a community we're engaged in making it happen.
Okay, thank you. This next one goes to Alex first. We'll have 30 seconds per person. Changes to Austin Energy's Green Choice program in the past few years made it so that customer participation in the program doesn't directly cause the utility to increase its use of renewable energy. What, if anything, would you do to change the Green Choice program to ensure that customer participation is directly resulting in the increased use of renewable energy?
Well, I think that the first thing we need to do is we need to utilize more. We need to utilize our solar panels and our solar power in a much better capacity. We're doing good things in terms of, you know, moving forward in terms of our reliance and usage of solar energy, but we need to continue. We need to continue working with solar power companies in order to, you know, make solar power and solar panels more accessible to individuals. That's really it. That's really the basis of everything.
So I would change the name of the program. I would call it the Green Imperative. I would say that we absolutely must do this. We have to go forward. I don't think the program is strong enough. I think I've made that clear. And so, you know, we need to look at these things as a collective experience, as everything is interconnected, and this is a unified mission. I'm also concerned about the money being spent on the awareness campaigns that could actually just be directed straight into the resources.
I agree that participation in the Green Choice program should be an additive. If we're able to provide a certain amount of renewable energy within our system without people paying the additional cost associated with the Green Choice program, when someone's willing to do that, we ought to be able to then leverage above what we would be able to do. So I agree it should be added.
Heather, would you please also bring that microphone a little closer to the two of you so that we can hear both of you? Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, and Laura?
This is 30 seconds or 60 seconds?
30 seconds.
All right, just have to calculate my response. You know, I don't know the answer. I agree, yes, it should be done. It should be based on that, and I don't know the answer of how to do it, but it does bring up a really, really critical issue, and that is that, you know, within Austin Energy, we have all these experts and all these financial experts, and it's all complicated and everything, and sometimes it's the staff are not responsive to the council's policies. And that's where it really is time to rely on your EUC members and the community to help you understand what's going on, because frankly, there's some pushback that has to be done, so you can actually achieve the policies that you want to set.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, the next question, we're going to go a quick 30 seconds again on this. Utility scale solar has reached remarkably low pricing, which has set the distinction between West Texas solar and local solar, which comes with more direct economic development benefits. How do you weigh the costs and benefits of large-scale solar far away versus local distributed solar? And how would you balance investment in each?
Well, as we know, when we have a solar farm far away, we lose a lot of that power on the way here. So I wouldn't sign any power purchase agreements with any solar farms that are far away. I would look at all localized generation. We have the rooftop space, and then we're going to supplement that with the quantum technology. So the quantum technology actually uses less acreage, it's less cost, it's more effective, it's EMP resilient, which we haven't talked about and is actually the greatest public safety threat to our grid. So no solar farms far away.
I think the best answer to that question in general sense is the solar contract that we're just about to enter into, which is a utility-sized solar contract in our area that's going to be at the lowest price of anything that we've been able to enter into thus far. Because it has the advantage of not only giving us the power at that rate, it's local, it helps us with the congestion issues that we have. We can't rule out solar and other things as they exist farther away because there are different sun conditions at different periods of time, and we're dealing with a power that we want to have as dispatchable as we possibly can. So it's a question of balance, and the greater the technology changes, as we get the battery capabilities, we'll have more options.
Well, again, I think it's a matter of the council pushing the policies and putting the steps in place so that they're defendable policies. And I'll go back to the local solar advisory committee because we were getting pushback on that. And that required experts that were able to look at the financing and understand the economic development impacts and the real value of solar. And that led to us adopting a rate structure that actually incorporated the externalities. We need to just keep on that and make sure that we have the information available to make the arguments.
I think that another thing that we need to do is we need to also work alongside mayors and council members of our neighboring city to try to create solar plants close to Austin so that we can rely on more locally sourced solar energy. And I think that also when it comes to development, we're one of the fastest growing cities in the United States, and I think that we need to speak with incoming developers and kind of mandate that they build solar panels on the roof of multifamily homes and big apartment complexes or condos that they put in downtown Austin.
That's it? Next one? Okay. This next question starts with you, Steve. You have 30 seconds each. With the adoption of the 2017 Austin Energy Resource Generation and Climate Protection Plan, the utility was directed to study options for how to achieve 100% carbon-free energy by 2030 to offset customer demand and to report back to council in 2019. As mayor, will you actively support a plan to phase out the use of fossil fuels at Austin Energy by 2030 at the latest? Please answer yes or no and explain your position. I said 30 seconds.
And the answer to that is yes. I mean, what we have found repeatedly with respect to climate change mitigation in this city is that we have continually set goals that have been beyond what current technology or current pricing allows us to be able to achieve. And in the face of that, this is a city that has done that repeatedly, only to find that technologies have changed. And surprise, surprise, we're able to actually meet the goals that when we set the goals, they weren't achievable. And I think that one of the reasons that's happened is because cities like the city of Austin have been willing to push the envelope on that. That's why we put that provision in the 2017 plan when we adopted it.
Yes, I absolutely support that, and I think that one of the things that will be important in achieving that plan is for the mayor and the council to continue to push to allow for Austin Energy to understand the seriousness of their interest in actually achieving that plan, so that it will be an all hands on deck approach, and there will be real accountability to making that happen. You know, there's the Austin Energy Oversight Committee, which is an opportunity to really delve into things and make it happen.
Yeah, and as mayor, I'm going to strongly encourage and advise Austin Energy to purchase more sources of solar energy, and also when it comes to reducing our carbon footprint intake and our reliance on fossil fuels, we need to do something about our Uber drivers and our Lyft drivers. You know, there's thousands of unregulated vehicles on the road, and at the very least, you know, I think that we definitely need to support a trend towards renewable energy by 2030, but let's start by placing a cap on a number of rideshare drivers on our streets to help mitigate some of the negative environmental effects that they're causing.
So if you know me personally, you know that I always like the brutally honest truth. I like to be told whatever it is, no matter how it's going to offend anybody's ego. And I think we need to get a little bit more rebellious and break some rules. And we need to be harder, because Laura is exactly right. The utility sometimes is getting in the way. Austin Energy. So do we need to fire people? Do we need to hire new people? You know, do we need to declare that this is a public safety issue #1 and the state or Austin Energy cannot get in the way? I mean, we need to be willing to circumvent the structures that are impeding progress.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move on to the next segment. This next category is transportation, so if everyone wants to take a breath, we're moving really fast. Transportation greenhouse gas reductions. Austin's community climate plan has 3 areas of action: energy generation and efficiency, waste management, and transportation. Of these, transportation is arguably the most off track in terms of our meeting our goals on deadline. Implementation of an effective transportation plan requires effective demand management strategies, coordination among regional governments, and effective transition into emerging technologies in electrification and last mile solutions. That's our intro.
There's the intro.
Take
I'm
it
so happy to get this first question. As mayor, would you use your influence to support the passage of a bond in 2020 to fund the next phase of urban rail in Austin? Please answer yes or no, and then explain your position.
I'm very committed to making sure we get high capacity transit, and as I understand it, rail is on the table and should be on the table. Although the modes that are being discussed are still open. And so I'm open to that analysis, but absolutely. I know that there's some discussion about other funding options, although we need to be prepared to do a bond because we can't rely on getting what we need from the ledge, for instance, in 2019 if we go for a local option. But it's absolutely critical. But as I mentioned before, it has to have the trust and the engagement of the community, and that's why I'm concerned that at this point we have taken a left turn off the track of where we need to be, because there was broad consensus up until March, and then the new presentation that was made just recently was based on something that was concocted outside of that process.
Yeah, I think that this largely depends on where the rail goes, though, and how frequently the rail runs. You know, I'm all about increasing our transit and increasing our transportation options, but it has to be done in a practical manner. And you know, so when I first moved here, I had to take the Metro Rail to Lakeline, and the train stopped running at 6:30 p.m. So I had to take a bus back, and you know, I'm all for a bond to help improve mobility and add a rail system, but we need to know, it needs to be practical. You know, it needs to actually service the needs of everybody in Austin. It needs to service the needs of people outside of Austin, and most importantly, it needs to run consistently. So that's my take on it. So I support the use of an efficient, practically run rail system.
So you mentioned regional, I think in the opening, some people are under the impression that there is a big plot to delay, so that the urban sprawl development industry can continue to perpetuate the single-use vehicle transit and other things. I don't know about that, but people are mad. People are mad for good reason. Because it should be on the bond this year. I mean, it should have been done a long time ago, of course, but right now, we have a plan, which we can explain in later detail, that will actually accelerate our ability to construct these projects. So instead of waiting 10 years, we do it in 10 months. And it all has to do with cooperative, incentivized, volunteer efforts. So money does nothing. People do everything. We have to remember that. It's very important. We can accomplish a lot more when we transcend our limitations.
The answer to that is yes. I've been advocating for a 2020 bond or major push to give us this regional high-capacity transit since 2016, and I'll continue to advocate for that. It's a presidential election year in 2020. We'll never have as good an opportunity in the first presidential election year after Trump to have the electorate that we need out of the ballot to make that work. It needs to be regional, and I think that in the conversations I've had with our regional partners, I think everybody is ready to consider, in Williamson County, Hayes, in each of the cities, everybody having the same Prop 1 on their ballot at the same time to deliver the kinds of things that we saw happen in Seattle and Phoenix with respect to the regional plan. I have the experience, and I'm proud to be part of a council that actually did a successful transportation bond, and a $720 million bond that people were saying shouldn't be that big. We fought for the big. It has $145 million of active transportation in it, dwarfing anything that we've done before. I went out and advocated that. I put my political capital on the line in the 2016 bond. I'm ready to do that so that the bond election that I call for as a council member, I support and help get passed.
Okay, so I've been instructed that for the remaining questions, until we get to the very last segment, we will now be doing 30 seconds per question. So you got that, Stan? Great. Okay, so, and we start with Alex, is that correct?
Yeah.
Great. Okay, as we grow and evolve our transportation system, how will you ensure that this evolution is both sustainable and equitable? How will you know that you're successful?
How will I know that I'm successful? Well, I'm going to surround myself with highly intelligent, economically savvy people to help go over the data about our transportation industry. Also, with the technology that we have and with the resources that we have in Austin and the propensity of electric cabs and pedicabs, there's over 500 pedicab permits in the city of Austin. I don't see how we cannot utilize this efficiently if we actually used our electric cabs, our pedicabs, our dockless scooters, our electric bikes to actually service the needs of the people. It's literally the most efficient way to address our transportation needs as possible.
So this is all about prioritizing community engagement. When we hear that we're going to have an 18-month process of community engagement, we remember Code Next and how so many people were left out of that process and not economically available to even participate. So what we need to do day one, well, first thing I'm going to do is 100 days of town halls right after inauguration, 12 hours a day. I've got the energy to do it, to sit, to listen, to really go deep. But we're also going to create an open source modeling platform, which is kind of like a Sims Google Maps meets IBM Watson, so we can actually open source to the broader community. And we're out of time, but it'll help us model the future.
Your question was, how do we ensure equitable transportation? And I think the way that you do that is you set specific objective metrics at the get-go in terms of what it is that you're going to be measuring. People on high-capacity transit, travel time to doctors or to employment, access to healthy food, proximity. You set really specific metrics, and then you measure performance, and you compare the metrics, how you compare the results to the metrics that you set. you make it objective and you measure it.
So certainly what gets measured is what gets done, and I think I'd like to just specifically focus on equity because it's not sustainable if it's not equitable. And what we need to do is make sure that we are addressing upfront the fact that people have different needs, and that's particularly clear when it comes to transportation and mobility needs. So where there are higher needs, we need to make sure, and less opportunity for other options, we need to make sure those folks are served well. And let me just mention one other thing that's absolutely critical, and that is that we need to, that one of our foundational principles needs to be having proactive programs in place to address displacement, because that's not going to be all right if we drive people out.
Okay, our next question is, let's see, we'll be starting with you. Yes, okay, thank you. The electrification of transportation through Cap Metro's Project Connect and other vehicles will drive more robust electric demand and also help us to meet our climate goals. How will you help Austin Energy move to make this transition to electric transportation beneficial for the city and for the electric utility?
I just want to say that Gil is walking around with cards and he's taking questions. So if you do have a question, there's Gil. Essentially, I think we have an opportunity to actually lead the planet and create the technology that we can then sell to the rest of the world in a profit-sharing, cooperative business model, so that we can have the labs where people are innovating the new type of electrification and conversion technologies. We all know it needs to happen. It's about us leveraging that opportunity for new revenue streams.
I think that the current practice right now is to push council, this 10-1 council is pushing Austin Energy pretty hard on electrification elements, which is why we have so many charging stations that are going in. We have Electric Way in the city that's now serving as the model to help raise awareness in the city. The auditor is just about to launch on a study of best practices in taking our fleet more aggressively to the electrification goals that we have in the city. Austin Energy is applying for grants with respect to electrification because they're available now in ways that they were not available before. And I think that here pretty shortly we're going to have electrification elements up and down I-35.
Yeah, electrification is an obvious opportunity for Austin Energy, and they need to be able to be thinking broadly and innovatively, especially with the technology that's going to be here that I think we can all believe in for real mass scale storage, capacity storage through batteries.
I think that these are all really good points, and I also just want to continue to reiterate that we need to use the electric technology that we have here in Austin. I mean, we have scooters, we have Lime scooters, we have electric bikes, we have electric cabs, we have motorized pedicabs, we have Cap Metro, and with the way we're going and our continued reliance with our increased use of solar energy, we definitely can take some big steps with these resources going forward.
Well, thank you, Travis, for thinking to mention about the cards, because we are going to open this up in just a little while to audience questions. We do have another section that we're going to cover now. It's waste greenhouse gas reduction. So here's the kickoff to the section. Our waste is the source of significant greenhouse gas emissions. When organic waste such as food or yard trimmings is disposed of in landfills, it creates methane, a powerful greenhouse gas. While the Austin greenhouse gas inventory only accounts for emissions from our regional landfills, the production of the products we use is also a major source of greenhouse gas emissions. Reducing waste and recycling, including composting, it's all important.
Okay, again, 30 seconds for each of these next questions. The Austin Community Climate Plan is scheduled for an update in 2019. Do you support the emissions, including the emissions embedded in all of the products people use in the updated greenhouse gas inventory, and a new section of the plan to address these emissions? Please answer yes or no and explain your position.
So I think the answer to that would be yes. And it goes back to the first question that I think that I was asked with respect to the externalities, and it was in that context it was relating to carbon. But the same thing is true with the production. One of the best tools that the city has is the procurement process that we have. And I think that the city needs to make sure that we're maximizing the strength of our purchasing capability in order to be able to address those externalities.
Yes, I guess I can't remember the format of the question. It was do I support that? Yes, okay.
And explain your position.
And explain the position. Yeah, we need to continue to think more broadly. That's, that's part of the proposal that I would like to see implemented, which is to have a very broad thinking environmental review on our policies and the actions that the city takes, including impacts on the climate and our climate, and that's obviously going to include production and big broad views of what we're doing.
Yes, I support continued review of our climate process and our environmental efforts. I think that when it comes to the environment and being aware of what's going on environmentally, we as a city should always be reviewing our environmental policies. I think that I definitely support the 2019 review, and I think that we should have, annual or biannual reviews moving forward to stay on top of our environmental issues, and especially with the rapid increase of technological development, and continue to monitor how technology is going to affect our environment going forward.
So I can't remember who said this, but somebody said economics is brain damage because it doesn't account for environmental factors. And the problem is when we look at things just on a data sheet, we leave out a lot. We have to update our understanding of physics. Everything is connected. We're all entangled on a quantum level, so everything is a factor. When we talk about methane, we also have to talk about the mass-scale meat production. I mean, that's one of the largest sources of that, and that is a product as we consume. And so I think we need to look at perhaps working statewide with hyperlocalization and those type of things as well.
Okay. All right, so for the next question, we're sticking with 30 seconds to try to push through here. So Austin has not been meeting its zero waste goals for several years. While Austin has goals to reduce the amount of waste that is disposed of in landfills and has programs to support those goals, there is currently no requirement that anyone actually recycle waste that can be recycled. Recycling requirements have increased recycling rates in other cities. Would you support a recycling requirement in Austin? Please answer yes or no and then explain your position.
I would certainly support looking at that. I'm not sure exactly what that would look like and how it would be enforced, and I'm not a fan of putting into place ordinances that are not enforceable. And that's a big picture big question I haven't thought about, so I would need to give it more thought. But I do think that there's more the city can be doing that we haven't done already, including supporting the hub the hub to actually create a center for recycling, using recycled materials in this town, and that's something that got stalled and it didn't move forward, but it's something that we should move forward.
So I support recycling education over recycling enforcement, mainly because anybody with half a brain knows that you should recycle to preserve the environment as well as your physical and emotional well-being, plus the physical and emotional well-being of your friends and family. So yes, I support education on recycling, and I don't think that, I think we've evolved to the point, especially here in Austin, where we don't need an ordinance to tell people to recycle. They already know.
John Steinbeck wrote about the single-serving nation a long time ago, and we've had this problem. It's going to take a major cultural shift. It's really going to be difficult. And like I said earlier, when we talk about Austin taking really bold steps, radical steps, it's going to affect the supply chain for all of this corporate behavior. I was just talking with the owner of Juiceland today about he's thinking about switching to glass and bring your glass back and recycle program. So but then you have to talk about transporting the glass from point A to point B in the trucking. So there's so many factors in this. I'll just answer the question. I say I don't support something that could potentially hurt low-income communities.
I'm not sure what a recycling requirement would actually look like in implementation, so I need to better understand what that would be. But I am proud to have been part of a 10-1 council that has been very committed to recycling and committed in a way where we've been putting dollars against it, not just talking about it. So we have participated in increasing fees for Austin Resource Recovery in order to be able to support that new equipment. And we put, just as in this last budget, put in recycling in all of the parks in our city, that infrastructure to be able to build that because it is a priority.
Okay, next question. While Austin is expanding composting to all residents that receive city trash and recycling services from Austin Resource Recovery, there's no plan in place to provide composting service to the growing number of Austinites who live in apartments and condos. The Austin Community Climate Plan implies that an expansion of the Universal Recycling Ordinance will be needed to require composting service to be provided to all Austinites, regardless of what type of housing they live in. Do you favor having Austin Resource Recovery expand composting services to residents in multifamily housing or requiring the use of private companies?
So I think that we need to definitely expand composting. I also believe that we need to do it in as cost-effective of a manner to actual residents in Austin. When it comes to implementing this policy, we need to have the actual property developers finance and pay for that, and that could possibly be a measure as to whether or not they can build on city land.
So these are definitely interconnected, recycling and composting, because oftentimes the problem in recycling is that when you have the food waste left over in the thing, and how do you enforce all that? When you have compostable, biodegradable plastics, you can actually compost that material with the food, and then it's actually easier on kind of the lifestyle choices. Again, this is coming back to the bigger, broader issue of, we're gonna have to make some fundamental changes in the way we behave in society if we're gonna still have a society.
So,
I'm losing where we're starting. It's all blurred to me, Jess, so you guys are doing a better job than we are of who started each one. Thank you.
so composting and resource management is the third main thing that we need to be dealing in. Composting is an expensive element of that, but it's also a very necessary part of the chain. And again, this 10-1 council has not just talked about it, but has actually stepped up to make both the hard financial decisions, because it's expensive, but also the hard political decisions. Not only to expand the pilot program from composting to all neighborhoods, but to really stand by and bring it to the restaurants and the commercial folks in town where it's necessary to have that happen. And we need to expand it to multifamily.
Yes, I'm absolutely supportive of expanding to multifamily. When I was on the council, we passed the zero waste plan. When I was on the council, I was the one that pushed for the really strong single-use bag ban. And it's interesting to take that as a lesson. Forget about the fact that the legend did that. But the fact of the matter is people were really scared about taking that big step. And it was clear that it was going to be a cultural shift for people to figure out how to live with it, with the requirement that they couldn't use single-use bags. And it's the same thing here. We need to be able to move forward, and we need to be able to make those cultural shifts.
Okay, thank you, everybody. We're going to keep this next section really quickly so we can get on to the audience questions. This is the unclassified questions category, and we're limiting it to just one here so that we can get moving. Here it is. Well, Austin is expanding composting to all residents that receive city trash and recycling services from Austin Resource Recovery. There is no plan in place to provide composting service to the growing number of Austinites who live in apartments and condos.
Skip it.
I'm in a war period. Okay. Oh, okay.
Okay. Okay, no, it's this one. Yeah.
Sorry.
Travis County leads Texas in solar jobs, in large part because Austin Energy has supported the installation of solar at homes and businesses. What would you do to keep solar and other green jobs growing in Austin, and what policies and programs would you support to help Austinites access these jobs?
Yeah, our solar plan actually would be the biggest catalyst for the solar industry that anywhere has ever seen on the entire planet. Because we would literally have every single day solar being installed on rooftops all across the entire city. I've already spoken with the organizations that are willing to come and volunteer their time to train people how to do this. So, you know, we have the plan. It really just takes the courage to step out and implement it.
I think it's real important for our economy as well as for climate change mitigation that we really double down on clean energy jobs in the city. And solar is one of the areas where it has the greatest upside potential. You just have to look at what's happening in San Antonio right now. You know, there was a day and age where we were so far out in front of San Antonio, and in recent times we've lost that to San Antonio. So I think a lot of it is taking a look at the practices that they're doing.
You know, the fact of the matter is there are more job openings in this town than there are people that need jobs. So we've got a mismatch. And I can tell you that ACC, I know, am aware, has some great job training programs. So I think that this is an opportunity for the city council, and Austin Energy to push forward to really expand the job opportunities in the local solar installation.
Thank you. So that's for the three of you all gone?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, this last section before we move to audience questions are candidate-specific questions. So you'll actually get 60 seconds, each of you, and there'll be a question. So these questions were designed to be in response to your written questionnaire that you provided in order to participate in the forum. And so we have one question for each of you, and we are going to randomize who we ask first. And it's a good thing that Alex is back, because he's in the mix here. Okay, we're randomizing. Ready? A little comedy relief. All right. Okay, the first question goes to Travis. In your questionnaire response, you called for the selling of Austin Energy's portion of the coal-fired Fayette power plant. The current plan is to shut Austin Energy's portion of the plan down by the end of 2022 and permanently eliminate emissions from it. Why do you think it's more important for the utility to make money from selling the plant instead of eliminating over 4 million metric tons of CO2 per year?
Yeah, so the question was phrased in a little bit of a gotcha way, which I appreciate, because the number one thing is that if we sell it in 2022 or later, we're going to get way less money for it, and I think we need that money. Some estimates are $400 million, and my suggestion was that we plant hemp everywhere, because hemp is the largest sequesterer of carbon that we know. It restores the soil, and it becomes a new revenue source, because hemp can make building materials, food, medicine, the biodegradable plastics that we need. So actually it becomes a new profit-sharing revenue stream that is greater than Austin Energy ever could have. I just want to say, lastly, on the jobs part before, what's really important, one of the dynamics that we have right now that's a big problem in transitioning to renewable energy is that there's so many people employed by the energy industry because it has been commodified, and so that is one of the primary resistors of change. So we need to make sure that we're not creating more long-term careers that are going to resist evolution in the future. I hope that answered the question about plant hemp. That's what we need to do.
Okay.
All right, next randomized person here. We're going to Alex next. In your questionnaire response to a question about the mayor's role as a member of the Austin Energy Utility Oversight Committee, you said that all city-owned buildings need to work toward complete sustainability for their power needs, and that you will incentivize homeowners to put solar panels on their roofs. How would you assess the current administration's work in this area, and what would you do differently? And please be specific.
How would I assess the current current administration on the use of solar panels? Well, it could be better. I don't really see very many solar panels on our roofs here in Austin, which is why I brought up incentivizing ownership of solar panels on people's roofs. I mean, this is literally the reason why I brought up a property tax deduction. So I think that's pretty clear on that. And also, I just want to compliment Travis on his response to planting hemp. And when I get elected, there's going to be a place for you on my staff with that statement.
This next question is for Steve. In your questionnaire response, you said that Austin Energy needs a new business plan. You also identified that as one of your top energy priorities when you ran for mayor in 2014. What specific actions have you taken to facilitate revamping of Austin Energy's business plan over the past 4 years, and what specific steps and on what timeline do you commit to doing that moving forward?
We do need a new business plan that takes into account selling less power and less water over a period of time in order to be able to make sure that those utilities still can survive. We pushed Austin Energy and Austin Water both on those plans, and they've made adaptive changes to what they have been doing. Austin Energy's moved to a risk analysis with respect to the renewability portfolio that we're allowed to have. It's actually led to greater agreement among all of the users of Austin Energy, which is why for the very first time we're going into a legislative session. Last session and this session where large industrial utility users have signed off that they're not going to be doing anything in the legislature to try to take away governance or management because we've been able to move to that risk model on the renewable energy. But there's still a lot more that we have to do. And I'm not convinced at this point that if we continue on the track that we're on, that Austin Energy can survive. So we have to look at additional or separate profit centers for both of those organizations.
Thank you.
Okay, and by the process of elimination, Laura. In your questionnaire response, you mentioned that you were a member of the 2014 City Council that adopted a goal for Austin Energy power generation to be carbon-free by 2030. However, because of staff objections, the goal was not included in Austin Energy Resource Generation and Climate Protection Plan that same council passed later that year, and it is therefore not recognized by Austin Energy leadership. And what would you do going forward to ensure that City Council, not staff, is setting policy?
That is a great question. We also had adopted a goal of 65% renewable by 2025 from the recommendations that came out of our task force. But then when it came around in December and we actually finalized the plan, it had been dropped to 55%. So there's several situations that arose like that. To hold folks accountable, I think one of the things that we really need to look at, because there's a lot of frustration in this community about staff not being held accountable, and what I would like to see is that we adopt some very high-level, highly critical priorities that we have. For instance, the retirement of FAF and things like that, and that we get specific about them with regard to our city managers' annual performance evaluation, and let him know, in this case, let him know that that's precisely what we're going to be measuring him on the next year. And so I think that's a high-level approach to being able to really zero in on some of our critical priorities.
Okay, so before we start this next section, we just want to give everyone, and please don't leave your seats, but we want to give everybody an opportunity to simply stretch. We've been sitting for an hour and a half, so if you'd like to just stand up and stretch, and we'll just sit right back down and stretch. Thank you. You're welcome. Leave it in. Okay. When you're ready, have a seat and we'll continue. Okay, so first, I do want to say thank you for everyone who submitted questions. We got many more questions than we could include. So just want to acknowledge that, and they've been put in order, and it's not my fault which one we leave out, so please forgive me. So first question, the City of New York has committed to divesting the employee pension funds from fossil fuels investments within 5 years. As mayor, would you work toward a similar commitment for Austin? In the meantime, would you be willing to make current investments of all 3 Austin pension funds transparent? Oh, sorry, 30 seconds on that one.
I guess I'll start. Yeah,
Let's start with Travis and then we'll just take it from there. I don't remember.
Absolutely divestment. The sooner the better, because the cities that are last on this are going to get the worst deal. Because we're already starting to see countries divest completely, and we need to make sure that our people who are on retirement pensions, who depend on this money, can really have a secure retirement. Again, it may be different, but we have to look at industries like the hemp and cannabis industry as potential investments because they're great investments.
I certainly agree that all investments need to be transparent, and I think in those pension funds, I think they are. The control that, there's a legal constraint on our ability to be able to control the pension funds. So City Council can't give a direction to the pension entities with respect to the funding that they have. If we could, I think the City Council ought to consider that kind of stuff, but it's not a tool that we're given.
I would absolutely support moving towards, I would support divesting, and also and I'm not sure what the status is on pension funds and transparency, but clearly would push for that. But it's important to remember that the City Council has seats on the pension boards. So there's a lot of influence that they can have, and I think that it makes sense to have that conversation and ask that they push toward that.
I mean, yeah, of course I believe in that, and I think that we have a lot of emerging markets. I know Travis mentioned hemp, but we also want to mention lithium as well, and that's a big energy source that's going to see a huge rise in the years to come. And we should also continue investing in our technology sector. Technology is going to surge in the past decade with how things are going and with all the new inventions and all the new products that are being made. And just one last thing, Tesla shares are down a little bit, and it might be a good time to it might be a steal.
All right. Let's give this the one. Thank you. Next audience question. Thank you, Janice. How would you ensure fiscal responsibility while striving for ambitious climate goals? What is your tolerance for spending to reach net zero? So we'll start with you, Steve.
I think the fiscal goals that have been set out that Austin's been using are the right ones to use, where there's not an increase more than 2%, where we're in the bottom half of rates. And the reason I think that's right is because by setting those goals at that level, those affordability goals, we've thus far been able to avoid having the state legislature come in and seriously undermine our ability to be able to use Austin energy the way that we have. So I think that both of those goals are important, not only because they provide affordability, but because they provide for us and have historically some sustainability with our operation.
The beauty of Austin Energy is that the City Council is the governing body of Austin Energy and is able to make those decisions. And you all might remember, I think it was 2013, when the then current mayor started an initiative to actually turn it over to an independent, unaccountable board, and I was proud to have led the charge to keep that from happening. And so my tolerance is, in terms of paying for it, we have affordability guidelines, and we'll do everything within those, but we will make it happen.
That was some other control.
Yes,
Yeah, so I definitely support this 100%. I just think that it needs to be done in a way that we continue to be somewhat of an affordable city, you know what I mean? We can have the cleanest energy in the world, but it does nobody good if everybody's being pushed out to a town or a county that doesn't have the same environmental standards that we do. So I'm excited to work with the council and work with other members to help ensure that this happens.
Yeah, the great thing is that this actually isn't a choice we have to make, because the renewable technology that we have available to us in the quantum level is cheaper, it requires less acreage, it's more reliable, and like I said earlier, it's actually the only technology that is resilient and immune to any sort of electromagnetic pulse, which could come from a solar flare or some human cause. And actually, I would flip it right back around to the state and say, you have been shirking your responsibility for public safety, and we need to make sure our grid is actually resilient, because right now it's very fragile.
Thank you. Speak loudly. Here we go, thanks. So this next question says, I was very disappointed by the state's determination that cities, municipalities can no longer determine their own regulations regarding plastic bags. Since plastics are a major contributor to our pollution issues and help drive climate change, how do we deal with trying to improve the situation while state governments thwart us at every turn, whether it be plastic containers, fracking, or conserving trees?
Vote.
That's what I was gonna say, Dale. I'm up first, is that right? Yeah, absolutely, there's the education, there's the highlighting of the good corporate folks that are in town that are really buying into that and maintaining, but it's about what's happening in the legislature and who's in the legislature and how the districts are drawn, and we need to vote, and we need to change who is representing this state so that the representation is for the good of the people.
So yes, I too believe that we should vote. And you know, I would also like to reiterate that there is no planet B.
Thank you.
And you know, we need more environmentally responsible individuals, you know, at the state level. That's 100% true. And in terms of the bag ban, luckily, the majority of Austinites are extremely environmentally conscious, and they are enforcing that anyway. So I feel blessed to live in a city full of such environmental stewards.
Yeah. Right.
I appreciate that optimism. Unfortunately, I saw the plastic bag ban as just another way for HEB to sell other types of plastic bags. And unfortunately, it wasn't a ban. It was just, hey, we're going to force you to buy these ones. And then they wound up back in the creek as well. So that's an example of why incrementalism doesn't work. As in regards to the state, they have no authority over you or me or any of us, because in Article 2 of the Texas Constitution, it clearly states that the people have the authority to dictate what the government does. So we need to circumvent the state, and it doesn't matter who's in there because the Constitution protects us.
Oh, I feel so protected.
First thing I want to do is I'm going to vote for Travis for Supreme Court. So Really? So I think voting is clearly the most important thing we need to do, because so much of these decisions are made at state leadership level. We don't have to just rely on that. We have cities that are now organizing in a way that cities have never organized before. We saw that in the immigration issue, we saw that in the LGBTQ issue, and we're seeing it on preemption issues. So I'm spending a fair amount of my time working with other cities in the state, because this used to be something that was just directed toward the city of Austin. But it's no longer directed at the city of Austin. It's being directed at cities generally. And then we have to support the businesses that are hanging in with respect to the bag ban. I was just very public with the one retailer that announced a national plan, giving them, promoting them on social media. We need to help the others.
All right, here's an easy one for me, maybe not so easy for you guys. What actions can the city take to lower overall electricity usage? So where are we? We're starting with you this time, Alex.
All right, well, I think that if we had installed more solar panels along our roofs and along our houses here in Austin, we'd be less dependent on the Fayette coal plant. So I think that's a big thing, and I think that installing solar panels and making it so that the installation of solar panels are cost effective to the majority of Austin residents, that's going to go an extremely long way in terms of reducing our dependence on other sources of energy that are not as clean for the environment, like the Fayette coal plant. And we need to continue to increase our usage of solar panels to decrease our dependence on the plant.
So I'm just going to tell you why I support Proposition A and why I do not support Proposition J, because J would actually further delay our ability to put the environmental protections we need on the land development code that need to happen right now. So J is actually an environmental disaster, because what we need to do is we need to mandate that all new construction is net zero, rainwater capturing, smart water reuse, biofuel optimizing, and all of that. We have the materials to do this. All you need to go is at the open house is this Friday at the Center for Maximum Potential Building Systems. Plenty Fisk and Gail Vittori will tell you exactly what we need to do to have no energy usage. And then there comes the issue of converting the existing buildings.
Well, I'm real intrigued with you saying it's an easy question. So I want to.
It's an easy one for me to ask.
Oh. I thought there was like a really easy answer here, and I'd love to know what that is, because this is both a hard one and an easy one, because we live in a community that is predisposed this way. One of the most wonderful things that's happened about this community is the per capita decrease in water and in electrical usage in our city. It's one of the greatest generators we have of those resources. How do you lower electric uses? We need to make sure that we're doing the weatherization so that people who can't afford to weatherize their homes have the ability to be able to do that. A lot of it is the awareness campaign effort, as we did in water, as we did during the drought season.
Well, it's about lowering usage overall. It's about lowering consumption overall, all things great and small. And demand management is a huge part of our planned portfolio, our planned resource portfolio. And I'm not going to be the expert to answer exactly how to do that, but we've made great strides in that. And I would just like to clarify that Proposition J relates to a comprehensive adoption of a comprehensive plan. Comprehensive land development code rewrite. It does not preclude updating and changing and making amendments to the environmental regulations that we have. So we will still be able to do that if Prop J passes.
Okay, next question, 30 seconds. And by the way, Stan, what we're going to do is if you can stop us about 5 minutes till the hour, we're going to give them an opportunity to close, and then we'll make our closing remarks and be complete.
Okay, we've got 4 minutes.
Till
5 minutes.
Oh, got it. Okay, good. Thank you. All right. Looks like one or two more questions. Let's go. 10 seconds. 30 seconds. Did you see the Austin Eco Network blog on how difficult it is to buy an electric car? What are your ideas on incentivizing dealerships to market electric cars to customers well?
Oh, good question.
Start with Alex, or is it me? So I touched on this a little bit earlier. I think we need to incentivize the people to switch. And I'm willing to go as far as, hey, give you a 50% discount on all your utilities. Basically, we have to make it such a no-brainer to switch. The other thing is, we have to look at the plan in terms of in conjunction with the urban rail. I don't think we need to be incentivizing the dealerships. I think we need to be actually innovating the new technologies and incorporating that into our bigger public transit strategy.
I love this question. When PEC was starting out, before people actually had a lot of use for electricity because they didn't have it before, their business model, PEC, involved them making a lot of money by giving people credit to buy washing machines. So they created the demand for the electricity that they were selling, and they provided, as part of their business model, providing the means for people to be able to buy the utilities. That's what I mean when I'm talking about changing business models. I think the city of Austin ought to be purchasing the used electric vehicles from around the state because they're pretty good deals, but they're remote. And I think we should be bringing those into the city, and then we should be selling them, and that should be a profit center for Austin Energy.
I did not read the blog, and so I don't even know what they mean by it was hard. Like it's difficult to find one, or if you want to buy one, there's a lot of rigmarole you have to go through.
Second, the latter, and both.
Okay, everything. Okay.
It was pretty, yeah, the editor must be.
She went to San Antonio.
She bought one in San Antonio, but could not get one in Austin.
Okay.
Salesmen were ignorant too.
They're disincentivized.
Yes.
Does that provide context?
That provides context, and I'd love to be able to do instant policy creation, but I would definitely think that it makes sense to look into that, to explore it, so I could understand it a little bit better, and maybe come up with some ways to really address it, because obviously it's if that's one of the barriers that's going to be keeping us from moving forward. Austin Energy needs to think about it. We need to think about it.
So, who here saw Who Killed the Electric Car? I too saw that movie, and it was very informative and very riveting. And I strongly encourage everyone on our council, as well as everyone in our state legislature, to watch or rewatch that movie, because we do have the resources and the ability to use electric vehicles here in Austin at a much higher rate than we are doing right now. And we need to figure out a way to come together so that we can actually do it, but it's not as far out as people claim to be.
Okay, Stan, do we have time for one more before we move to closing?
I think we're going to have we're at 55.
Okay, let's do the closing then.
Okay, great. So first of all, I just want to say thank you again to everyone who submitted questions. Thank you for being here. And thank you to all of our candidates. These were questions that the four organizations who put this together, 350, Austin Solar, Austin Shades of Green, Media, and Earth Day ATX. We put a lot of time and energy into these questions, and we really appreciate your candor and your thoughtfulness and your responses. Thank you so much for being here and for answering the questions. And then also, I have a couple of points of order, but is there anything else you wanted to add before we move to closing?
Just that we're going to randomize the closing order just like we did before.
Okay, and as Reed prepares to randomize the closing order, as we did before, I will also let you know that in a few minutes we will be leaving, and if you'll please just pick up the trash that's under your chair as you leave. And then also just wanted to extend an informal opportunity. If you'd like to come to the green room, it's just down the road, just right down there at 48th and Grover. Thank you. At 48th and 49th and Grover, just right down the road. So if you'd like to come join us, we do have beverages, and we'll have more food, and we can all mingle and hang out. And the green room, by the way, is the Earth Day office. Also, we do have more forums coming up, more candidate forums, so please look on Facebook for those candidate forums. We have districts 1 and 3 coming up next week, is that correct? And then 8 and 9 is next week, and then the following week we have districts 1 and 3.
Yeah, and I'd just like to add to that, reiterating thanks to all the organizations that have been involved, all the people that have put your time into making this happen, and the questions and everything. But also to the other folks that have helped support this. Thanks, John, for running the sound, and he is capturing it for future broadcasts. So we've been streaming online tonight, but we're also going to be rebroadcasting portions of this on Shades of Green radio show. And also thank you to the camera folks too. The video is important too, and we're going to hopefully get a chance to broadcast that as well. So we appreciate the editing time that's going to go into that as well.
Have we stalled enough to give them time to develop their closing question?
I think so, and I've got a randomized little set of cards here too. So here, why don't you go ahead and tell them who's first.
All right, great. Steve.
And how much time do we have?
You have 1 minute each.
Okay. I would really appreciate support to running re-election for mayor. I think that this 10-1 council has a track record that would demonstrate the kind of work that we're willing and able to do in addressing our large challenges at the scale of those challenges. The $720 million bond proposition that had more active transportation than we've ever seen before, the Prop A that we're seeing for affordable housing that's coming up, the work to initiate an 18-month conversation on high-capacity transit, fighting Trump and Patrick on issues like sick leave is going to be coming up, the bathroom bill is coming back, fair chance hiring we did in this city, living wage up to $15. We've done pretty dramatic work on climate change and purchases with the generation policy. We've put in tenant protections and funding immigrant resources. We've reached net effective zero with veteran homelessness in our city. We've changed the incentive policy in the city to focus on businesses that are here and training people that live here. The first ever regional workforce development plan focusing on middle skill jobs, taking 10,000 people out of poverty into middle skill jobs. I would like the opportunity to be able to finish that work.
Thank you. Laura?
Thank you. Obviously, we have a lot of work to do. I think there's a tendency to rest on our laurels. I think there's a tendency to pass up opportunities to be stronger than we are. My record on council was always to be pushing for the community's values, whether it was environmental, whether it was neighborhood, whether it was social services, to really serve people first and not special interests. And I think that that's what we need, a stronger focus in the mayor's office in the coming years, and that's why I'm running for mayor. So I would appreciate your support, and thank you all for listening tonight.
Alex, you're next.
So, I'm not by any means an expert on the environment. However, I do know for a fact that we as a city do a terrible job of utilizing our resources. And there are some very obvious and common sense things that we can do to help do a better job in terms of how our resources are allocated. I feel like I brought this up a lot in the forum. I talked about the need for high capacity transit and practical routes for that. I think that we need to expand our bus routes more as well to help people depend less on vehicles. We need to put a cap on the number of Uber drivers operating in downtown Austin, because when you have thousands upon thousands of unfingerprinted drivers who are desperate for money, it doesn't take an environmental expert to realize that all those carbon footprints into the environment is a bad idea. We have, dockless scooters, electric cabs, we have all these things, and, instead of keeping it super concentrated downtown, especially with the dockless scooters, we need them on our bus stops, we need them by our transit centers, we need them at our apartment complexes so that we can actually use our resources to help the environment, which is what this whole forum has been about. Also, I refuse to take money from the fossil fuel industry, and I wanted to conclude with that.
Okay, and Travis?
I'm so grateful to be here, to be among all of you, and thank you so much. This has been a great forum, very thorough questions. I'm also very grateful for where our older generation has led us to. We've learned a lot. We've learned a lot of things that may have worked, and we've learned a lot of things that did not work very clearly. Our democracy is actually in a crisis point. I think it's time to pass the baton to the millennial generation. I think we're uniquely positioned to lead. We can engage the young people, the next generation who desperately needs engagement, needs their voice to be respected. I believe there's a place for our elders. I greatly respect our elders, but right now, I think it's time to let the youth lead. So this may seem like a risk to vote for me, but actually it's a greater risk to not vote for me. So I'm very grateful to be here again. Our website is wearethemayor.com, and you can learn a lot more and contact us, and I will be at the green room afterwards so we can chat. Thank you so much.
Once again, thank you so much to all of our participants tonight, and all of you for participating and being a part of this process as well. I just want to add a few more special thanks because first off, the questions are online. If you want to review the questions, they are online at Solar Austin.
That would be the questionnaire.